Hey, Garrick, I don't know about you, but Love in the Time of Cholera was a book that was once read, and the phrase that keeps going through my head is life in the time of coronavirus.
Yes.
Why don't we do a podcast on coronavirus?
Okay.
Let's go for it.
Let's do it. Two non-medical guys.
That's right. If there's anything that the world needs right now, it's two mildly educated missionaries,
dads,
dads, right, who have no authority on anything, riffing on coronavirus.
What the world needs now. Did you remember that song?
Burt Bacharach, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's also the Cracker song. What the world needs now is another folk singer.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
Like I Need a Hole in My Head.
Oh, yeah.
It's old 80s. 90s alternative, but maybe not super appropriate. But
funny. We were so we get to still go outside, unlike you in Spain. Yeah. And it was Monday. It was a beautiful day and warm for this time of year, in the high 50s. So I mean, just incredible.
Whoa! Yeah.
So we canceled everything, and the kids were off school for Easter break. And so we drove out to our favorite kind of national park area, and we were going to go for a hike.
Wow.
And on the way there, one of the kids said, "I wish I had $1 million." And the old Bare Naked Ladies song came into my head. So I pulled it up, and we introduced our kids to If I Had $1 Million. And they thought it was the greatest song ever.
Yeah, those guys were pretty creative.
Yeah, really creative. But they're the most Canadian band ever.
Yeah.
Like even like there's I hope we're not offending the Canadian in our audience.
No, the Canadians are never offended. They're always like, "Oh, it's okay."
Oh, yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Don't you know? But anyway, so there was one song that was kind of like, it was a kind of a breakup song sort of thing, and it was even pleasant. Like, and I was just like, that's so Canadian. You're breaking up and you're just making it nice.
Very Canadian, yes. Yeah, the Canadians have a very, very positive, friendly people generally. Except maybe the French Canadians. I don't know. I don't think I've ever met a French Canadian. I've always known just the regular ones.
You know, I've met a couple, but they were really nice people.
Yeah, and Canadians are incredible. Yeah, very kind, very, very friendly. I've met Canadians in different places in the world just randomly on like trains.
Yeah,
or at hotels, and they're just incredibly friendly, nice.
Yep. Always wearing some kind of Canadian identifier on their backpack or whatever they're wearing, so that they aren't mistaken for Americans.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
Yes. Yeah.
if there's some Canadians listening.
So funny story. When we first moved to Sweden, we were living in essentially a youth hostel. And we were having trouble finding housing. And so we've been living there a few weeks, and I was down in the common kitchen area. And there was this group of people talking, European students from around Europe. But of course, common language then is English. And so they were sitting there chatting, and anyway, I was cooking, and one of them said, "Hey, we're what did they say? What part of Canada are you from?" I said, Canada. I was like, why'd you say Canada? I'm actually from Texas. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. And they just laughed, and they said, well, we know that if you're American and we guessed wrong, you'd be proud to be like, I'm American. But if you're Canadian, you kind of get ticked off that everyone thinks you're American. So like, you just go with, they said they had learned that you always say, are you Canadian? And then the Americans are just like, heck no, man, I'm American.
Yeah. But the Canadians then feel very respected. Oh, yeah. That's really smart, because then the Canadians are like, whoa, you guys, good job.
Yeah. And then we've had, of course, international, we've had tons of people from all over the United States come through and do partnership stuff with us. And here in Sweden, and Victoria and I noticed that most of the time, most people will say, well, I'm from the US. But when it comes to myself, Texas, and Victoria, Los Angeles, we're very proud of where we come from in Texas and California. You don't say, I'm from the US,
Yeah. Well, and my wife too. My wife, she says Texas. I'm from Texas, and which is interesting, because I wasn't born in Texas. She wasn't born in Texas, and it's kind of it's an interesting thing. A lot of people move to Texas, and at first you have kind of a reaction against Texas, like, oh, these people. But very quickly you become absorbed, and then you become no. I'm from Texas.
Yeah.
I was I was talking to a student once. She was from California, and her dad was in oil, and he had to travel to Houston all the time. And so the one time he was in an elevator with kind of some like, more like oil field worker guys, roughnecks and stuff. I mean, nice people, but people who get the oil out of the ground. And they asked him, so, because he was dressed a little differently. And they asked him, well, where are you from? And he goes, well, I'm from California. I said, well, I guess you got to be from somewhere. But there's a whole culture of that, right? Of Texas pride. And it's hard for people to understand, I think.
Until you get there.
Until you're there. And on one hand, it's an incredibly welcoming place, I think. So I'm not we're really off a rabbit trail here, but another place
this is totally about coronavirus.
Distinct culture. I mean, the fact that my wife, who is born in Saigon, is Vietnamese American, but would almost identify more as Texan than any of that stuff. I mean, that's all part of her too, and
right.
But Texas, and even her family, Texas is important.
Which is okay. This is a really strange thing. Well, one, there's the T-shirt or bumper stickers. I'm not from Texas, but I got here as soon as I could.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really interesting to me because, okay, I'm from Houston, Texas. I love being from Houston, Texas. I love
great
Houston.
City. It's a great
city.
City.
When I was watching the hurricane stuff, online, I was like, man, that's my town. Like, we're the greatest town in America. I don't ever want to live there again, though.
Yeah, most diverse city in America.
Yeah, I know. So it's really crazy to me because so I used to jokingly have this theory that somehow everyone in Houston is related. Otherwise, no one would have chosen to live there because it's just a terrible weather. I mean,
the weather's
I actually have a friend who loves the weather, and Rob Oliphant, if you're listening, you are a mystery to me. But there is something special about Texas, and I don't know what it is. It's not Southern, but it's Southern. It's not Western, but it's Western. It's not Middle America, but it is Middle America.
Yeah.
It's just Texas.
And it's not Mexico, but it's Mexico.
Right.
I mean, Mexico is a huge part of the culture, and how we do things, eat, how we communicate. Even it's a hobgoblin of cultures and peoples. And
Four of the top 11 populated cities in America, Texas.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Sometimes, I think I've lived in Andalusia for 15 years in Spain. It's a great place to live. But I always think, if I had to live somewhere else, I have these, images of, being in a truck, being able to drive around farm to market roads, go visit my friends down in South Texas. I got a friend who lives down in Castroville. You go down there, go hunting with him. I mean, that's like I was in Texas. That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my idyllic.
So, whenever I try to explain Texas to people who have never been there, I usually tell a story. I assume that this story is true, but I leave room for the fact that it may be apocryphal or maybe exaggerated. But because some of it, I wonder the legality of things that happened. But early on in the George W. Bush presidency, so this story was told to me by a guy who grew up in Crawford, Texas, where President Bush has his ranch, or former President Bush, I worked at Texas A&M bus operations at the time, so we were both driving paramedic shift or paratransit car shift, and so you kind of hang out in the break room until someone who has a wheelchair needs a pickup, so you go and whatever, and there's usually two of you, so we're just sitting around chatting, getting to know each other, and George W. Bush had just been elected, so this was 2000 or 2001, right? And he was eager to make sure that the local population of Crawford did not feel the burden of Secret Service, protection and everything. And so early on, there's two stories that this guy told. So there's a burger place outside of Crawford or in Crawford or whatever. And when he first became president, the Secret Service said, he was like, hey, I want to go in here and get a hamburger. I love the burgers of this place. And I said, well, Mr. President, you just can't just go in there. We haven't checked it out yet. And so the so the Secret Service guy said, well, I have to go in and check it out. So he went in and he said, okay, I'm going to need all of you to leave. The president's going to come in and get a hamburger. And these two ornery guys from the back said, heck no, we've been here a lot longer than he's been president.
Yeah.
and then this other one, there's this situation where right up next to the guy who owned the land, and this could be verified, but it's better not to verify it because it's a better story. And the guy who owned the land next to President Bush's ranch had a deer blind up. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was right on the edge of his land. And so here you have deer season, people with high-powered rifles and different stuff. So early one morning, Secret Service is out driving around, making sure everything's okay. And they see this guy, this deer blind for the first time. They're like, hey, we got to check that out. So here this suited, Secret Service dude gets out and starts traipsing across the field and scares some deer that the owner of that deer blind was about to shoot. And so he got ticked off. So the story goes that he turned his rifle and shot towards the Secret Serviceman. He was so ticked. He's like, you scared my gall darn deer. So apparently President Bush from then on made sure that things were done differently around Crawford.
Yeah. Small town Texas.
That's Texas.
A little different.
That's America, right?
That is America, yeah.
So that brings me in some sense. Then we'll bring this rabbit trail.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Coronavirus. So part of it, I wonder, because I was talking with my brother, and I'm kind of of the conviction that every country has to figure its own response, which should be a reflection of its people. Or take into account how people will respond to things.
Yeah.
So in Sweden, we don't have really strict rules about meeting. And I mean, we have 50 people as the max.
Oh, wow.
If you're at the grocery store, you have to be 6 feet from each other. If you're in line, store owners are told to please regulate, depending upon the size of your store, how many people are in it, different things like that. And by and large, people keep to it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a sense in Swedish culture that you obey. You have a high trust of authorities, and you obey what they generally you obey what they ask you to do. There's a great I'm blanking on his name. He works for is that American Enterprise Institute? Yeah, I think it's AEI. Why am I blanking on his name? But he says he has a saying that he says pretty much any form of government will work well if you have Swedes.
Yeah.
Because they just do it, right? But then you have places like Texas, or where my mom lives, Oklahoma,
or Spain
or Israel, where people have a high tolerance for risk, and
not following rules.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to me, because in Spain, people pretty much have now followed the rules except for the chicken walking person.
Yeah, I mean, so Spain, one thing it does have a culture generally of, I think, of solidarity, of when there is a need, when there is something to rally around, people rally around it. Going back to Basque terrorism, and when people as a nation rallied against that, even the March 5th attacks, Al-Qaeda attacks, people rallied around the soccer team. So when there's I think a big event, Spanish people come together really well. Now when things are more normal, then it's a little more fragmented. People do their own thing. So I think people have done a good job. I've been really honored and touched and blessed to kind of be here in Spain and see people really get involved and really do what they can to help stop this thing. Of course, you've always got some people who are going to go around and break the rules and stuff, and
the yahoos. So, but what have you seen that people are doing to help stop this thing, other than staying indoors? Which, to be honest, if you're a Spaniard and being isolated, is a pretty big deal.
It's hard. It's everyone in Spain every day at 6 to 7 o'clock. People go out and go for a walk. That's just normal. And so we're in the beautiful time of the year when people are outside. People want to be outside, and so it's a very difficult It's very difficult not to be social, not to see your friends. But I think with but people in Spain also very much respect and honor their elders.
Mm.
And so I think that's a big thing. Is I hear if we can save the lives of grandparents and people who are older, that is well worth it. So I think those things have really played into the culture that have been positive.
Mm.
It took a while to figure that out, all that stuff out,
Right.
and definitely it'll be interesting to see how things in the next couple of weeks. I do think you at some point reach a breaking point for some people, and I know talking to some friends, for people who have some mental problems, some emotional problems, some anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
those people are really struggling right now because they're
Yeah.
not allowed to do the things that could give them a little bit of release to the stress of being cooped up in an apartment.
Right. Do you foresee just a giant party or a controlled release of people? Because Spaniards, they love groups. They don't like being alone.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. They've said after the 26th, things will start going back. They'll start gradually easing restrictions and going back to a more normal way of life. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah,
because there could be a point where people just need to go out in the streets and have a good time. And
okay. So let's that brings up something that I have been wondering about. There is a lot of ink or electronic ink being spilled over.
Yes.
This is going to change everything.
Yeah.
From how we interact as human beings, how big stores can be. I've heard people say we're never gonna have offices again. We're all gonna commute over Zoom and different things. I'm actually pretty skeptical towards that.
Yeah, me too.
But so why are you skeptical?
Well, partially because this is not the first time the world's been through a huge thing. And what I would say
is wait, what?
yeah. So, I mean, you and I, we're old enough to remember 9/11.
Yeah.
Our parents would be old enough to remember, the 60s,
yep.
which were in a time. I mean, you go back and watch Ken Burns's Vietnam documentary, and you look back and you look at the 60s, which we kind of sometimes idealize. The 60s was a horrible decade, especially towards the end. There was this thing called World War II, where 500,000 Americans were killed, and
which the Queen just reminded everybody of. Have you heard of her speech that she gave?
I heard of it. I haven't heard it yet. She's quite a leader. Yeah,
I read some of it, some takes on it, and I mean, just the fact that she, one, it's very helpful to have someone old enough in a position of just moral authority, let's say, in a country or whatever, however you want to describe it for the UK, who has memory,
yeah.
Who can say, hey, look, I remember when I was a kid during World War II, I had to assure all the young children who had been shipped out of London to the countryside that everything was going to be okay.
Yep.
Now I will say that certainly there is a psychological change that happens.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm wondering. A lot of times people seem to, when they say this is going to change everything, they're usually, at least maybe how I'm hearing it, and I could be wrong, but what they seem to be saying is this is going to impact things negatively, or it's going to change things so differently we're going to kind of evolve into different things other than a human being. And I just don't know that I see that happening. I actually think even some of the, like, one thing that I'm actually thinking, so for America, you talk about work, right? And you talk about Zoom and all these different things. Americans love to work, right? We work long hours. We take very little vacation. We don't know about leisure life. I had a Greek guy. I was in Greece one time, and I was at a convenience store, and this guy said, "You Americans, you live to work. In Greece, we work to live."
Yeah.
And
or live to live.
Yeah, right. But I think that there was this idea there that, and be critical of Greece and their financial difficulties or whatever, but I'll tell you what, they value things other than economy.
Yeah.
Which interests, sorry, this is a total rabbit trail, but one of the greatest books I've ever read was the biography of John Adams by James McCullough.
Yeah.
And which the miniseries was based
I saw the
off
miniseries.
of.
Yeah.
So there's a part when Adams was a what do you call it? Ambassador to France.
Mm-hmm.
They actually show it in that film. There's the party where all the French have makeup on and they're laughing, and Adams is just ticked because he's kind of like, look, there's a war on. Let's get to business, sort of thing. And the French are just enjoying life. Adams said, and I think it reflects a very American ideal. But Adams said, my children have to study war so that their children can study science, so that their children can study arts and leisure and everything else. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. Actually, Adams was spot on. That's what happened, and that's what needed to happen. But I don't know that Americans have actually ever gotten to the leisure part. So under the Nixon administration, they were really concerned. So there was a commission that came out that said, in 40 years, we're going to have too much leisure time. Americans are going to be bored because they will only work 10 to 15 hours a week because we'll become so effective with everything. And it's actually been the opposite, right?
It's been, yeah.
Yeah. And so you just have these things. So there's not leisure
we can do
there.
More now.
Right. So actually, I wonder if what I would hope for is that in an American setting, as some of these, when the dust settles and people start evaluating how effective was what was work during this period of time, I actually wonder if it won't show, oh my goodness, we were just as effective and people were working from home getting interrupted by their children and different things like that. There was a professor out of Harvard, and I forget the study. This is where I get myself in trouble. But he kind of came to the conclusion that people who work 40 hours a week in an office are only really effective 30 to 40% of the time. The rest of the time is just wasted.
Yeah.
But he theorized that we actually need that in order to find that effectiveness. So you can't just say, well, you're only going to work, 15 hours a week and you'll get done the same amount of things. It's like, you would only be effective 30% of the time, which is theory. But anyway.
Well, let's be honest too. The only reason some of the be effective from work is that you already have built trust within your teams and the people you work with.
Right.
Already. So it's very easy to transition onto online. What would be almost impossible at this point would be to start bringing new hires into your business who are just going to work from online that you don't ever get the chance to meet. So I think there's a value.
That's a really great point.
There's a value in personal. I mean, we're humans. We still need personal contact. We still need to build trust. We still need to see each other face to face. Maybe not as much. So I have a theory on this. So I think you brought up something interesting about how cultures are responding to this. I don't think I've seen any continental European thinker or writer or newspaper yet, at least not in Spain, who's suggesting that everything's changed. The focus,
that's fascinating.
The focus is now getting through this, getting back to normal life and moving on. But Americans, particularly in ministries, like everything's changed. Now things have changed in the media, right? This is a huge game changer. Has anything changed in how we do ministry? No, we still love God. We love our neighbor. Those are the two core things. So how do we do that? That's very difficult right now, or we have to be creative. But we're going to go back to a time when you can go visit people in nursing homes, when you can, that's going to return to normal.
Right.
We're going to go back to the normal ministry, and people are going to desire that. But I think because we're Americans and we're future looking, right? And because we, in the last 20 years, this internet thing, Twitter, the need to be ahead of the curve, right? So it pays, it looks good to jump ahead and be able to say everything's going to change. Now, if you get it right, you've got that in paper. And I'm not saying people are consciously manipulating. I think it's just because that's the culture we're in right now. So people automatically going to jump into a situation and go, things have changed. Things are changing. Let's think about it. And so then they write. And so, it's great. But the reality is you and I lived through 9/11. People said the same thing. Everything's changed. And certain things changed. Air travel got a little different.
Yeah, but even though air travel got different, incredibly different.
Yeah.
It's only increased.
People still travel.
It's really interesting to me. It's like, well, sure, but things change. Like like my mom doesn't have an avocado colored kitchen anymore because things change. Like I loved our avocado colored kitchen, and actually would be back in style today. So okay, but so the prognostication, right? Everything's going to change, and we're all going digital. The shift to digital, especially among ministries, right?
Yeah.
Big push right now to you got to be on digital and everything else. I think if you make that investment in places like Spain, in 6 months, you're going to be going, no one's checking their phone anymore.
Yeah.
because everyone is going to want human contact. I kind of see it as the moral equivalent of always picking the underdog in the NCAA tournament. When you get it wrong, no one cares. No one thinks you're a moron for picking that team. They just think you're a little quirky. But when you get it right, they're like, you're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in some ways, I kind of see it that way.
Yeah, and I think there's and the other thing I was talking to a pastor friend of mine for the U.S. Some of the digital stuff is new, right? I mean, you and I have been working digitally. I've been leading teams digitally for years,
right?
But that does, in a local church in the U.S., they never would meet digitally, right? So this is kind of a new thing. So it's a little bit of a new toy. There's the other issue of saturation point, right?
Right.
Like at some point, I don't need any more emails about how coronavirus. I mean, partially because now it's becoming a marketing tool. I get emails from every company now. Hey, it's coronavirus. We've got a great deal for you, which is classic America. Turn something into marketing.
Right.
And a third level is like we're at some point as the church, we're competing against, or Christians or missions, we're competing against Disney Plus, Netflix, and
the Amazon. Rabbit Trails podcast. I mean,
yeah. I mean, we're still, and we're also competing against some very flashy, some churches who actually have amazing teaching, amazing production value. So good for them. They've been doing that for a long time. That for them, maybe they're picking up a few more, viewers, and that's great. I'm not criticizing that.
Right.
But what I think is that there's a backlash to that at some point. And I think as Christians, we need to remember we are embodied spiritual people, and that requires seeing people. It requires hugging people. It requires, at the end of the day, doing what Mother Teresa did, or what a lot of churches do, just go visit the sick and dying,
right?
And praying for them. And so I really don't. Okay. Then one last point. There was a terrorist attack in Paris last week.
Was it really?
There was like, it wasn't a big one, but that's what I'm saying is like we had the 9/11, and then what happened? We all kind of got moved on with our lives and got used to, every once in a while there's going to be a terrorist attack, right. and that's horrible. We all understand horrible, but we're not going to allow that to stop the way we live and the way we enjoy life.
Right. It hasn't fundamentally changed what a human being does or who a human being is. No. And that's where I go to. Although I think there are, let's call them marginal change. So there's a great economist, Marginal Revolution, Tyler Cowen. Guy is brilliant. And he talks a lot about actually, if you change things at the margins, you actually end up changing things quite a bit if you look for marginal change rather than the whole, swath change. And one of the margins that I'm actually hoping for that gets changed is a reset of the family as an important part of one's life. So, some cultures do it better than others. The Italian family, the relationships that you have there, although the depth of those relationships, I don't know. We should get, people we know who can comment better on that. But at least in the American family, so the hectic pace at which I think Western culture, but specifically I would say Northern European and American. So I think the UK can be put into this. Mm-hmm. I think German culture moves at a quicker pace.
Yeah.
Netherlands, arguably slower though than America. America is the fastest pace of them all.
But Korea and Japan.
The overcommitted lifestyle though, right? That brings chaos, that brings anxiety. You're starting to see some of that kind of settle out. So Dave Robbins, the director of Family Life, posted a really cool post on his Facebook of looked like he almost lives in a cul-de-sac. I couldn't quite tell, but basically they organized in their neighborhood a lunch or dinner out on your front lawn, and their lawns are big enough in order to basically everybody grilled hamburgers, and they stayed in their area and kind of yelled at each other, but they all felt like they were in community in some sense. And, I watched another video that he had done with his family, because they're right now their theme is, or they've kind of said the family isn't canceled. Like everything else has been canceled, but your family hasn't been canceled. And so concentrate. And I thought it was fantastic.
Brilliant. Yeah.
But one of the things, that they were talking about is, it's really interesting now that we don't have soccer practice to rush off to, baseball practice, dance, all these different things. We're connecting with our kids again in a very different way. And one of my prayers is that in times like this, actually we have a good friend who even commented the other day. We were on our kind of catch up phone call with some friends, and he was saying how good it had been for his family. I look at that, and I would hope that Americans and the rest of the world, what this virus is doing is showing the weak points or things that maybe we could change and live differently. It doesn't mean fundamental change, but it means marginal change that would actually make a big difference. Like, does my kid need to be involved in 7 sports? Maybe we could pare that down to 2, because most likely they're not going to be Bo Jackson. So I don't know, things that I'm thinking about. So I think it will change things. I think the presence of masks on people who aren't Asian will start to be a lot more predominant during certain seasons of the year, because there's now an understanding of, okay, if you have a respiratory illness, it is those particles that you discharge between sneezing and coughing that gets everyone else. So let's think about what we're doing there. But otherwise, I don't want to say it's not. There could be huge changes as far as economics go. If we get into a depression or something like that, which I pray we don't. But even then, humans are still humans. So it may mean that like a lot of restaurants will close or a lot of businesses will close, but eventually there will be constructive new ideas and new energies. But that's nothing new. That's like, to me, that's like painting the walls. You're not building a completely new house, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think, well, there's a book I read from a doctoral program. I don't remember the name of it. I think it was like a history of media, right? And so it went back and it was talking about the huge developments in media. And we kind of sit around and the iPad comes out. You have all this kind of turmoil around whether the iPad is good, whether how we're consuming media. But what you see is that conversation has been going on for thousands of years. Every time there's a new, the printing press, and that was something that shocked the world. So I think you might see some continued innovation or changes in how things are done. But as far as actual, I think there's a good chance that there's going to be a lot less air travel in the next couple of years, but that'll ramp up again at some point. But what I'd say is like most people are going to go back to their normal lives within a year, within 2 years. Those people who are, maybe more affected or in sectors, eventually things will get figured out. So I don't, I just don't, we as a humanity, we've been through so much tumult and change and constant, liquidity, if you want to say, in some sense, Zygmunt Bauman talks about liquid modernism, and he's talking really about a speeding up of that. I think, but this isn't that. This is something that's way out of our hands. But I do think I think if we can help point people to, hey, what's really important? Family is more important than making a bunch of money.
Right.
Caring for people, doing the right thing is more important. Because at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is we don't really have control of our lives.
Right.
Let's just be honest. I mean, that's as much as we want to say we've mastered the world. We haven't.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was in. Kids had a winter break, actually the same break that brought coronavirus to Sweden, because a bunch of Swedes went skiing in the Italian and
I saw that article.
but that same break, we ended up in London. We had we were going to join some meetings there, and threw on a couple extra days to take the kids to London. They had always wanted to go. And so we went to the Museum of London, which is free. And we were walking through the plague section where they were talking about the plague in London. Of course, 100,000, 200,000 people died. And I remember thinking at the time, granted, the virus was out, right? So, President Trump and other countries had put a travel ban on things from, flights from Asia or from China. But I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's a lot of people, and they had no way to control it.
Yeah.
And the thought crossed my mind, we think we can control everything.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly enough, the CDC, since the Spanish flu, wrongly named, should be named like the Wichita, Kansas flu, right? But anyway, it since then it had always maintained like 14 quarantine centers all over the nation for outbreaks, where they could take people and basically shut it down and watch them and learn things from the disease, but also try to stop the spread of the disease. So they could, map who has had contact with this person and, figure out, well, you need to come and whatever else. And apparently in the 70s, I think it was, they closed them down because this is why. We think that the threat of infectious disease is now over. It's been eradicated. And George W. Bush actually brought them back. They're not currently being used. So it's something that's always been with us. It's just something that we as Americans in our lifetime have never, and certainly not Western Europe has ever had to deal with. And so I think it's scary in a lot of ways, because we thought we could control everything, and we thought that the disease was eradicated or whatever else. So I don't know. So hey, you read, there was that really good N.T. Wright article.
Yeah, very good.
About Christianity. The Bible doesn't have anything to say about coronavirus.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that article? Sum it up for me, and let's talk about that.
I think if I'm correct, he went into Lamentations about, a lot of times the Bible doesn't give us answers to. So I'm starting to kind of riff on other things here, but from what I could see, he was saying, hey, we shouldn't be trying to say this is happening because of this, or this is punishment, or this is some kind of new, Jesus is coming next week. We don't know, and we've been told not to try to figure those things out. What we need to do is lament, to be sorrowful, and realize that God laments with us. This is not something good, and so God is lamenting because we have, and it's speaking of the week of Easter, we have a God who has come near to us, has taken on flesh, has experienced pain and suffering and sadness, and so understands what we're going through. I think that's what he was kind of going with. Right?
Yeah,
I read it last week. Our good friend Joe Schlee passed it on to us, I believe.
Because I think he's spot on. I wish that we don't, as Christians, we don't. I want to be careful. Sometimes it is very difficult for us, because we're in the middle of things, to appropriately respond with the correct kind of emotion for the moment. We misidentify the seasons, or we get caught up in it. But Wright's point there, to lament, to notice what's going on, that this isn't necessarily the greatest opportunity for the new thing or whatever else, but rather just a time to go, we're human. Yeah. The Bible is full of stuff like that. The Psalms, the prophets, all of the Lamentations, obviously an entire book written about lamenting. To me, it's interesting because in society today, we talk a lot about, we're reaching young people, you have to be quote unquote authentic. To me, the Bible is actually, it is an incredibly authentic book. When you go to one, it doesn't hide the flawed nature of its heroes, excepting Jesus, who was not flawed. It doesn't it doesn't seek to gloss over, to make things look better than they were. When there is an appropriate response to a given situation, so whether it be lamenting or rejoicing or whatever else, it is just authentic in the way it approaches things. And I long for that authenticity among Christians today, among my neighbors. I was having a great conversation with my neighbor the other day about, he's got older parents, and I was asking, well, are you concerned? And he's like, yeah, I really am, because I don't think they're taking it seriously enough, and different things. And there's an authenticity there that I think is really important. And I think we forget how important it is. We think we have to have the right answers.
Yeah.
And so, kind of be courageous in the face of danger, when sometimes a recognition of a shaking in my boots is maybe even a better idea. It's like, we don't need to fear the end result because of who God is and that he's in control. But the fact that, no, I'm human and I'm shaking in my boots, might actually be a proper response.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that turns us hopefully back to God, and the realities that we have with him. I once I point back to Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, of that movie, opening up with a quote from Job. Where were you when I created the foundations of the earth? And obviously goes on, but he just has that one verse, and then you go into a tragedy in a family, and then you go into a 30-minute scene of the creation of the world and the majesty of the creation. Those two things are juxtaposed to say we have a God that coronavirus isn't surprising him, who is a great God, a powerful God, who's in control and who loves us deeply. And yes, but that love does not spare us from pain and suffering and the realities. And so what's the purpose of maybe that suffering is a deeper question. Is that to draw us closer to God? Is it to make us, more human? Even because we're a culture and a society that flees from any hardship. Yep. I see it my own self, any type of hardship or pain. We live better than any human in the history of the world.
Right.
What we're able to do. And so so I think that's the question, is like, are we drawing ourselves closer to God in this time, and relying more on him as a Christian? And if maybe as not a Christian, are we asking the bigger questions and saying, if there's a God, what does this mean for me?
Yeah. It's interesting. The shortest verse in the Bible, quote unquote, of course, in English, Jesus wept.
Yeah.
And that is taking place in the middle of the story of raising Lazarus from the dead. Mm-hmm. Here is Jesus, who knew he would raise Lazarus from the dead, and yet in his humanity took a moment to weep for the condition of the human race, and specifically his friend. Glenn Kreider, professor at Dallas Theological Seminary.
A legend.
Love you, Glenn. So he wrote a book called God with Us, which is just absolutely, it is one of my favorite books. And but really, he just chronicles that this is the message of the entirety of the Bible, that it is not a new thing that God with us, that Jesus came to earth and that was when God came with us, but rather that God has been condescending to humanity since forever, since eternity past, or since the creation of the world, that he condescends into humanity to have relationship with humanity, and that he is a loving and good and compassionate and all-knowing in the sense of relating to our humanity. It's just a fantastic book. If you want a book that will change your perspective on God and Jesus, I highly recommend that book.
Glenn's a great guy.
Yeah. So there you go. Well, in this time of coronavirus, what is your family doing? I mean, you have been outdoors, 3-4 times?
I go out a lot because, I'm the one, if it's going to get coronavirus and die, it's probably should be me, right? No, just kidding. No, that's not it at all. But the kids obviously are not really allowed to go out. So they can't go out, and then so it's just easier for me to go out and everything. So I go out a couple times a week just to go buy groceries. So what are we doing? We watch some movies. we're painting a little.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Spain's an incredibly creative. They like teach you how to draw and paint. Like, I painted something. It looks like a 5-year-old did it, and my other kids paint stuff, and it looks like, professiontional artists. To me,
your 7-year-old did it, and it looks like a professional artist.
It looks really good. I'm like, whoa, that's really good. Mine does not look so good. Like, actually held mine up to my wife, and she goes, "Oh, did Violet do that?" I'm like, "No, this is mine." So we've been painting a little. We've been watching some movies, playing board games, getting online with family and friends a little bit here and there. But we're also, this week is Easter week, so kids aren't in school. So, but when school's been going on, we've been pretty busy with schoolwork. I feel like the teachers are giving more work now that they have we need to catch up. So we'll let So we're staying busy. How about you guys? What you guys have a less,
we have a pretty normal
parks.
We have a pretty normal life. I mean, thankfully, Sweden is the surface area, or the square mileage of California, roughly, with the population a little less than Los Angeles. Yeah. So we're spread out. So there's a good distance. I mean, if you live in the bigger cities, of course you're a lot tighter and stuff. But I mean, I go for a run every day, and I live on the edge of the city, and so I'm out. Actually, I run by the ancient Viking burial grounds. So there's this scene from Lord of the Rings where I forget his name, but the kings, it's in the extended version, but it's in the second film. It's after all the battles at not Helm's Deep, but it's that same movie. Who's the king there? That king of Rowan.
Thorin or something like that.
Yeah. So he buries his, son or?
Yeah, it's right after he comes out of being possessed.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So but there's the scene, and it's a very Viking burial scene. And actually the burial grounds there's all these little bumps and hills and stuff. There's 3 huge ones out by where I live, and then there's a bunch of little small ones. And so there's a church built over where they used to do animal and human sacrifice to the Norse gods. And so I run along a really cool pilgrim trail that goes out there. And so I'm out in the woods and beautiful country. And so our kids right now are outside playing with neighborhood friends and having a good time. So life for us actually is really fairly normal, except that I work from home and we don't really go to any meetings with, friends or anything like that. Restaurants are still open. But we just really haven't. We cook from home generally anyway. Yeah. So I've been barbecuing a lot, lots of grilling. I brought out the grill, smoked a bunch of stuff yesterday. So
very good.
And actually, it's funny. You do stay a lot more busy than you normally would with meetings or Skype meetings or whatever. But we've really tried to, as an organization, to pare them back to just what's necessary. We've told some of our staff that this is a downtime, and a lot of them are studying language right now. Really working, just taking on advantage of the times that it is, and not working or not overworking ourselves to try to have a sense of must be doing something. And so just trying to learn different rhythms. For me personally, in the beginning of this, I was checking my phone a lot. And I'm using the word anxiety a lot more lately. My counselor's trying to get me to do that, so I'm doing it. And I was building up a lot of anxiety, and part of it was just that sense of I got to check the numbers or I got to check the news, and so I was just constantly flipping through my phone. And recently, I've just kind of said, about 2 times a day is when I'll check it. I'll check it in the morning, and I'll check it, in the evening. And otherwise, I'm just going to stay away from it because I can't live my life by this. And so, we started doing Sabbath a couple months ago, and even more so now, we institute pretty hardcore, just shut off the phone, shut off the technology for a 24-hour period, and let our bodies reset and just enjoy not doing that. And so reading a lot more. So it's actually, in some ways, it's not been at all bad. I am ready for it to be over because I'm looking forward to, there are a lot of things we wanted to do, and we had plans and everything else. So
Yeah, well, and I think I think that's just where that's a great practice of shutting off media for a day, once a week, or even as we go into Easter for a couple days.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I think that's it's a really good idea. But I think what we're kind of seeing, it's interesting. So there was already a bit of a dialogue between technology and humanity going on right now, and this is also maybe this time of like we're so dependent on technology, and I'm not saying that necessarily in a bad way, but it does bleed into addictions and
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
anxiety. And so how maybe this is another conversation to have, how do we get back to, because at the end of the day, as humans, we need maybe not the Swedes, but we need human contact. We need that's part of healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people are gonna get back to that.
So I actually have this really random theory. Can't prove it. I probably shouldn't say it out loud because it might sound a little bit squirrely, but I think that there's, like I said, this is just an idea. It is not anything scientific at all. So please don't email me, people. But that I do think that there has to be some kind of mutual pheromone release that happens when, or I don't know if pheromone is it, but whatever, some kind of chemical something that is in the air when two people are meeting face to face. Like you and I are meeting over Zoom right now, doing a podcast. It's a lot of fun and I'm getting refreshed by it, but it's not the same as if you and I are sharing a meal together or coffee or just a face-to-face conversation. There is something very different that happens. And part of it's, you're not reading body language. Behaviors are a little bit different, but I actually think that there is something intangible that you cannot, even if you could reproduce most of what you could have, I think that there has to be some kind of chemical something that happens, but none of that can I prove, but there is a tangible difference to me.
Definitely. I mean, we're blessed by technology because like you and I can talk, but I'd much rather be sitting down and our families running around and what we do every once in a while. And it just gets back to pilgrimage, which is really what this is about is, pilgrimage is about a physical living out, communal living out in presence, but in the day-to-day of trudging along, seeing places, touching places, being able to experience something physically, that then is the metaphor for life. That is a metaphor for our walk with Christ or our theological reflections. I think we when we move out of that physical space, we lose a lot of the mystery, a lot of the beauty, a lot of the meaning of life. And I think people yearn for that. What are people doing right now? They're putting on Facebook pictures of trips they took and places they went to, right?
Right.
So you're looking like, oh, that's really cool. But if you hadn't been there, I look at that and go, that's New York City. I've been there. I've never been there. That looks good to me. Well, maybe I should try to think about going there someday. But otherwise, it's a total disconnection. There's a gap between physicality and the virtual.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm not saying the virtual isn't useful and not good, and that's something that's part of our lives now. I'm not against it. I'm not a radical. Let's disconnect totally, but we still have to have that other side of it.
The other side of it. Well, we're created for somebody.
Yep. You need to hug somebody.
Yep. Physical touch and the presence of other human beings. Those are two things that are very important.
And to be experienced. The pilgrimage that we did, had we not experienced it with 5 other guys,
people. Yep.
I think it would have been all right to just go by yourself. But the fact that we experienced it with 5 other people made it an incredibly powerful experience.
Have I ever told you the day I decided I wanted to get married?
Mm-mm.
So I had a series of, let's say, unfortunate dating relationships that just, one of those things like you break up and you're like, yeah, that was whatever that was. I don't know. So, just not engaging with each other, like you just both kind of knew, we're not really into this.
This isn't going to work.
And I had actually come to a point where I was like, I don't really know if I want to get married, and random story, but I was living in Houston at the time, I had just decided to join staff. And so I had quit my job, and I was driving up to Houston, or driving up to Oklahoma from Houston to be with my mom over New Year's. And I got to Dallas and I hit really bad traffic. And I was just like, man, I hate this. It's going to take me forever. It's going to take me 3 hours to get an hour and a half north.
Yeah. 35, just try to get to Denton.
Yeah. And somehow I looked up really quickly, or I figured out really quickly, you know what, there's nothing west right now. No traffic. So I'm going to start heading west.
Yeah, there's nothing west, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's where I'm from. There's nothing.
So I decided, I started driving west. I was like, what's west? Maybe I should take a couple of days for myself. And I thought to myself, well, I've never seen the Grand Canyon.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And so I called up my mom.
It's like a song.
I called up my mom and I said, I'm driving to the Grand Canyon.
Oh, that's sweet.
And so I did. I drove to the Grand Canyon. It took me a couple of days to get there. I get to Flagstaff, Arizona. It's pouring. I mean, not pouring down. It's just hard snow coming down. Miles and miles of, it was a terrible snowstorm. Miles and miles of cars just on every side of the ditch. And I finally make it to Flagstaff, got what might possibly have been the last available hotel room in the entire town. And holed up there for a day and a half until it cleared up, and then drove to the Grand Canyon. And I'm standing there at the Grand Canyon, amazing, beautiful, incredible thing. And I'm standing there and I realized it sure would be nice to have someone to turn to and say, that's a big ditch.
Yeah.
And I realized, I think I do want to get married. Now, that's not the only reason one should get married. It's probably, if it's your only reason, it's probably a pretty terrible reason. Right? So thankfully, I was able to think that through more than just, well, I got married because I wanted a companion. But there is something to be said for, my point is companionship or shared enjoyment with a person that is beautiful. And I've got these incredible pictures. It was an incredible day. The colors are just incredible, of me at the Grand Canyon that I set up on a timer and went and ran over and got a picture, or had someone take a picture for me. But the reality is it wasn't nearly as deep as when I went there 2 summers ago with my wife and my 2 kids.
Yeah.
And we talked, and we were talking about the animals. And so there is something to be said for pilgriming or going through life with other people, that we are communal beings. No amount of technology can replace that. It is a decent, let's say, substitute from time to time. But at the end of the day, there's nothing to be said for the face-to-face.
Yeah.
Which in some ways, then if we think about the God who condescended, that there is no replacement for the fact that he embodied flesh. It's not, he didn't just do it spiritually. That would be essentially he zoomed it in. But no, he embodied it, and he came face to face with humanity and embodied humanity.
So there you have it, Barrett. This is a great line. So God does not use Zoom. God is not zooming.
He's not zooming it in.
He's not zooming it in. He actually is there with you, and in a very real way, and has been physically. And one day we will be with him in a very real way, in ways that we probably can't understand. He does not zoom it in, but we cannot control his timeline and what he's doing and why he's doing it.
Yeah. And so we are but frail humans.
Yeah, the C.S. Lewis line, right? He's about Aslan, right? In Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Is he a good lion? Yeah, he's good, but is he safe? Oh no, he's not safe.
Yeah.
No. I didn't say anything about safe. He's good, but he's definitely not safe. So God is good, but not safe.
Yeah, that's have you ever? There's a great band. It was out of Mars Hill Church. Called was it Ghost Ship? No, that was the name of their album. Anyway, they have a song on that line from the Terrence Malick film, Where Were You? And it is Job, was it 38? And it just goes through it is an incredible song. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes online. Anyway, it kind of hits the same idea. It's that God's response to Job and all of the suffering is creation. It is his power and ability to create. Job never fully gets all of his answers, but he learns to trust, and in that finds intimacy. Mm-hmm. But yet God no longer says, where were you when I created? He says, I died for you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it even progressed his willingness to identify with his creation. Yeah. Pretty incredible stuff. Well, Garrick, we are hitting, I don't know how long because I forgot to set a timer.
I think it's been a little bit under an hour.
Hey,
I think I'm looking at the time. So we did all right.
Hey, there you go.
We'll get these maybe shorter sometime. But
hey, question. Oh, I think we're just going to set the standard. It's about an hour. Hey, do you have any rituals that you do, like personal rituals, not like official things? It could be official, but like just things you do during the Easter season to remind you of. I personally like Easter better than Christmas, but I think it means a lot more. But anything that you do from year to year, just to kind of get you in the mood or in perspective to orient your heart.
That's a good question. I probably should have something.
Okay, sorry, dude.
That's all right. I know I do like to usually pick up a Lent guide from our church. Sometimes they do an Advent one. I don't know if they've done a Lent one this year, but or from someone, and just kind of read a few things. But as far as do you have anything?
I don't do anything. I don't do anything major. Every year it depends upon kind of how I'm very much an intuitive kind of how I'm feeling sort of thing, and kind of feel it out. I started 2 years ago. I started listening to Andrew Peterson has 3 albums called Resurrection Letters, Prologue, mm-hmm. Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I listen to those kind of on loop. So I just listen. And Andrew Peterson, to me, is perhaps one of the greatest artists America's ever produced, mm-hmm. at least Christian artists. His lyrics are incredibly rich. Music-wise, he's not everybody's flavor. But for mm-hmm. me personally, I like his music. But the lyrics in it are just incredible. Rich retheology, playful with words. So I listen to a lot of that, but I really connect with the Lord over music. It helps me orient my heart. So I have a hard time. I have a shrunken piece of coal for a heart.
Yeah, we all do.
And so music helps me discover a very soft beat in it. And, and so that's kind of what I do. Otherwise, we've been trying some new things with our kids. Just trying to create in them an anticipation for the risen King and for the coming King. Mm-hmm. We've done different things, but can't say that any of them have really stuck.
Yeah. We do some different things. Kind of depends on the year a little bit and where we are also in the world. Because sometimes we can.
Are
be
you just
traveling.
Gonna hide eggs around the house?
We'll do an egg because Violet's still.
That's right.
And so we'll hide some eggs. We've always done egg hunts in our house. In Spain, it's not a thing. They don't do egg hunts or anything.
Yeah.
So Easter's a little different here. But
what is the main food for Easter in Spain?
Oh, they don't. It probably depends on the town.
Okay.
Or the city you're in, or the region. So they could be like a different type of cake or a pie, not a pie, torta, like a different type of pastry is usually kind of the thing that gets. And there might be some family dishes, but nothing major. Like,
do y'all have a go-to food for Easter?
No, we just usually different things, different kind of whatever Zeus kind of experimenting with or wants to, we have a feeling for. With you guys,
I'm pondering going out and doing lamb this year.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, in Sweden you do hams, but I'm kind of I don't know. Even though I'm fine with eating pork, I eat lots of pork. It seems weird on Easter to eat a bunch of pork when like the lamb is the beast of significance.
What I really miss when we're in the States, if we haven't been in the States in Easter in a long time, but we try to connect a little bit is kind of like a liturgical service of Easter, and how that's I think that's really which in Protestant churches in Spain they really avoid that because it looks too much like Catholicism sometimes. But I miss that high church, very reverential, but that idea of
yeah.
And,
Hey,
and the idea of the resurrection.
Random question. But did you, when you were at DTS, did you have Dr. Allman at all? Was he there at the time?
Yeah.
So have you ever heard, he may not have developed it by then, but have you ever heard his view of the Lord's Supper?
I don't think so.
So
I had him only for Old Testament studies.
Okay. Yeah, he mentions it in his class on the Old Testament very briefly.
Okay.
But when he's talking about Passover, but he actually thinks that the Lord's Supper, that we've made it into this very somber kind of, sort of thing, and he actually thinks that it should be very much a celebration, because of what it signifies, the anticipation of the covenant, the current covenant, and so it's a really fascinating thought to me, and I wish I had him here. We had him scheduled to come to Sweden, and we had to cancel it because all of our staff were out of the country raising support. But
he's such a humble guy.
He really is. He reminds me of my dad. I took him, and even his mannerisms, how he talks, his facial, like everything. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like sitting in front of my dad. But he is a really, you talk about a dude sits there and teaches from a Hebrew Bible, directly translating it into English with syntax that works.
Yeah. But incredibly vulnerable and honest.
Yeah. He's got an incredible story.
And amazing guy.
There are litany of those people. So this will be my closing thought. There is I got an email from someone, a pastor of a well-known church in Texas. Well, Matt Chandler. Matt, what's his name? Anyway, something from Austin Stone in Texas is leaving and going to a church in Houston, and so they were sending out an update to the congregation and stuff. And great guy, great church. So nothing to say about any of those, and even he would say, hey, you worship the message of it rather than the preacher or whatever. And so, or not worship the message, but you worship the object of the message. And so really great guy. And I think good theology, all that stuff. But it's interesting to me though, how it got me to thinking last night as I was going to sleep, because I watched this video of him making an announcement. How many people are going to be sad today after getting that announcement? And rightfully so. He's a beloved leader. But how many unsung heroes are there of the faith who no one knows about, who are laboring in honestly, they're just unknown people doing incredible work, like if he had, so 18 years ago, it took him 18 years to plant this, big church in Austin, Texas, and they do incredible stuff. But what if he had decided to go and plant a church in New England? And he got it up to 500 people. Would he be well known? Would he be invited onto, podcasts, and how do you do it and everything?
The circuit.
The choices we make. But yet, I read this morning, the last shall be first and the first shall be last.
Yeah.
And in God's kingdom, how upside down that is. And I think if guys like James Allman or different seminary professors around the world who have incredible minds and could be doing tons of things and making money or getting notoriety, and they choose to teach at little places all over the world to help people understand who Jesus is and to teach others about him. I wonder what their reward will be,
Well, I think you're we said in the first podcast, God's bad at goals, right? He doesn't have goals or what, because that's the whole thing. It's this upside down kingdom where math is our math does not work, does not apply, where small things are really what makes a huge impact. Where I don't want to critique people who've got big churches or anything, because they started out somewhere, but the point is that we God's economy is not the way we want it to work many times. But in that is an incredible, you think, I did mention, women, what God did was use women in a powerful way, and throughout the Old Testament, and especially in the New Testament, in a way that did change the world.
Yeah.
To where now that's, and I'm someone who actually believes women should be ordained, should be preaching, but that's an incredible cultural and societal change that was instigated on Easter, by having the first witnesses, be women. But in that culture, in that time, that was not a smart move.
Right.
If you look at it culturally and societally, that was not the way to go. That you're going to make the main witnesses of a defining moment in history, a group of women.
Yeah.
It was
another great, and I'm blanking on his name, seminary professor. And why am I blanking on his name? We're going to have to edit this part out because I literally cannot think of his name, but he is incredible. And he preached a message one time called the Central Truth of Christ Likeness, Lanier Burns.
Yeah, Lanier. Yeah.
And, he, in that sermon one time, he constantly says this, so you just have to spend a few minutes around him to hear it. But he says, don't cheapen the gospel with marketing. It doesn't need a headline. It's strong enough on its own. And now that doesn't mean that we don't do marketing or, all these things. I think we do those things. But his point is that you can think of all the coolest methods in the world, but at the end of the day, it comes down to a Jewish carpenter who rose from the dead. And which I often reflect on and think, Jesus was a carpenter in a country without trees. That was a sucky, yeah, right? But I mean, it wasn't like he was a carpenter in
Sweden with all the those giant forests.
So I mean, he talk about that was a tough job.
I'm not sure olive wood is easy to work with either.
No, it probably isn't. But anyway, so the point being, and all these methods, and you and I are going to get to this because we're both going through the Stefan Pass book of church planning and Western secular societies. But of all the methods and all the other things, the only thing that should be put at a premium is the faithfulness of a few preaching Jesus.
Yeah.
Like it, just going about doing his thing the way he would do it. It's good enough and it's attractive enough on its own.
Yeah.
Which is reminiscent. If you've never listened to, I don't know if you've listened to this podcast, but a podcast called This Cultural Moment.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Some guy in there from two pastors, one from Melbourne, Australia, and one from Portland, Oregon. And the one from Melbourne had been involved in the emerging church movement, and then eventually kind of goes, what if instead of emerging church, missional church, all these things, what if we just tried to do church? And just do it really well and follow Jesus as best we can. And it's completely like revolutionized. The guys are Mark Sayers is his name. Really, really wicked smart dude. Anyway, okay. So we've gone way too long. Garrick, I wish you and your family a wonderful Easter. It is the best time of the year.
Yeah. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
That's right. Amen.
We'll catch you on the next one, buddy.
See ya. Thanks.
Bye-bye.